Hello, and so we get to the end of yet another week in Greek in 1 John. Today we're going to look at 1 John 3:11. So go ahead and see if you can translate that, if you have some adept ability, which is not a word, in Greek. Okay, here's my translation. Because this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. Well, I feel like I need some context. What's the previous verse? Previous verse was, in this is manifest the children of God and the children of the devil. Everyone who doesn't practice righteousness is not from God, and the one who does not love the brother. So now we're getting to understand what it means to do righteousness. What does it mean to do righteousness? Well, in 1 John, as in the rest of the New Testament, God's expectations for us are love. Love God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Love your neighbors yourself. The New Testament says everything. This is not the greatest commandment. This is the only commandment. There is only one commandment. Love God, and entailed within that, love neighbor. And that's it. All of God's commandments, Old, New Testament, for all time, for all history, for all eternity, love God, love neighbor. That's all of it. And so the one who practices righteousness is the one who loves his brother and sister. And so this is the message that you heard from the beginning, that we should love one another. We're coming to 1 John 4:7-8. It's going to come. Beloved, let us love one another. Love is of God, and everyone that loves is born of God, for God is love. The one that doesn't love doesn't know God. Yeah. So love is the heart, our loving treatment toward others. This is not a feeling either. This is not lovey-dovey feeling. This is the way we are disposed toward others, the way we act toward others, the choices we make toward others for the benefit of others. So this is the message, love one another. We can break it down. It'll say the same thing. So because I think this is a causal clause, as we'll see in a second. This, now don't confuse this with she. It has the same letters as she in the nominative, but there's two differences. First of all, she would be aute with a smooth breathing mark and the accent on the final syllable. This is haute, howdy do. This is a rough breathing mark and an accent on the first syllable. And that's the way the nominative form of the word for this looks. And this is the message. This is feminine because hey angelia is feminine. And so it has to match. And the is like an equal sign grammatically. Because this is the message that. What kind of a pronoun is that? Aha, it's a relative pronoun. It's also feminine because it's telling us about angelia, which is feminine. It's accusative because a relative pronoun introduces a relative clause. That means it's going to have a verb. And here is the verb of the relative clause. Acousite, you heard. You heard what? You heard the message. In its own clause, you heard what? You heard message. It's accusative. And so the relative pronoun is accusative because it's functioning in an accusative way within its own clause. Okay, that we should love one another. This is even more puzzling. We had another one like this. And I know, Anna, if you're watching, you said that Wallace suggested it was a result clause. Again, I'm not going to say it ain't so, but it sure feels a lot like a noun clause here because it feels like we're getting the content of the message, which would make this a noun clause. It feels like the hina has grammatically degenerated into almost a hoti. However, it could be a result clause. If it were a result clause, it would say, this is the message that you heard from the beginning with the result that we love one another, or in order that, it could be a purpose clause, in order that we love one another. It doesn't quite feel like that, but it could be. It could be, Wallace knows a whole lot more about Greek than I do. Okay, so there's our translation. Let's look at some grammar. So I've already said that if you translate hoti because, then what kind of a clause does it introduce? That's right, a causal clause. And we've already said what kind of a pronoun this is. What kind of a pronoun is it? That's right, it's a demonstrative pronoun. So that brings us to this. What kind of a pronoun is this? Do you remember? It's a relative pronoun, accusative feminine singular from hos, the relative pronoun. Okay, let's parse this puppy. Well, te is a second person plural, active ending. Okay, So second person plural, we'll say tentatively active. Alpha, okay, it's not fried, so it's indicative. Sigma alpha, what tense does sigma alpha indicate? Aorist, right. Is there an augment on the front? Yes, it's from akuo, and alpha augments to an eta. So it's aorist because the sigma alpha, active because the te, indicative because the vowel's not fried, second plural because it's te from akuo, because akuo is what's left when you pull out all the tense stuff. You know, pull this out, pull it out. When you tease it all out, you're left with akuo. Okay, that. Now, what kind of a clause is it? Is it a noun clause, or is it a result clause, or is it a purpose clause? Could be a purpose clause as well. So, voila. Now we added purpose for all perpetuity. I don't know if I'll ever use these PowerPoints again. But anyway, this Allelus, I did not, I ran out of space, and I didn't want the font to be small. So I didn't put it on this slide, but this is what's called a reciprocal pronoun, a one another pronoun. That leaves us to parse agapomen. So men is a first person plural, tentatively active ending, okay? Now, the omega, is it fried? Because if it's fried, then it's subjunctive. If it's not, then it's indicative. Well, I'm sorry to say we can't tell from the form itself, because this is agapao. It's an alpha contract verb. So the alpha, if it's indicative, the alpha is contracting, crashing into an omicron, amen, or omen. Now, with alphas and omicrons win out over almost everything. So if that had been the crash, you would end up with an omega, and we'd have a little circumflex there, police line saying, there's been a crash here, step back. However, let's say that the connecting vowel is the omega of the subjunctive. Then you would have an alpha crashing into an omega, and omegas win over everything. You'd end up with an omega, and we'd have our little police line there. So agapomen is an ambiguous form. It could be either indicative or subjunctive. So which is it? It's subjunctive. How did you know? Because of hina. Hina takes the subjunctive. Subjunctive is coming. Subjunctive is coming. And so we knew there was going to be a subjunctive with hina. So this is indeed a present active subjunctive, first plural, from agapao. And that's our grammar for today. So we get to pronunciation. Go ahead and see if you can pronounce this whole thing, and then I'll do my best. Okay, now here's my slow motion-ish pronunciation. Hoti haute estin, he angalia, hein acusite, aparcase, hina agapomen allelus. Okay, now let me pronounce it at a somewhat normal speed. Hoti haute estin heam galia, hein acusite aparcase, hina agapomen allelus. I tried. There is our Greek for the day today, and thus endeth the week of Greek.